Well, I don't want to put out a doom and gloom scare you video, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to give you the reality of the situation. The situation is for several reasons. So it's not even over some of the things or over some of the people are saying that are doom and gloom conspiracy channels, and that's the whole damn thing they do. But what we're coming up into, and it's not going to be next week or maybe even next year or even the year after, but over the next decade, I'll say that we're going to see massive starvation and global depopulation. Now, one of the major factors why we're going to see this is changes in the weather. Not due to the reasons that the established media is talking about global warming. If we were going into global warming, it would be far more. There would be far more food production on this earth. It would be a good thing. Yeah, some of the major cities would eventually go underwater, fine, but that would not be such a major problem because it would happen over 100 years, and I know they can construct whatever they need to construct to build dikes or dams or whatever the hell it is to stop that from occurring if it's in a real estate that is worth a lot of money. But where we're really coming up to a problem is a mini ice age. I know, some people are not believing this, and last winter was not, well, I guess this part of the earth, the northeast United States, except for one blizzard, it was not especially cold winter. But let me just tell you that there's several things coming up, and part of it is actually geoengineering, genetically modified foods that are. I'm going to tell you, I have not. I'm not going to give you a link on the exact places where I've read these things, but I've seen experiments where they use genetically modified foods to feed rats and mice, and what happened is the rats and mice develop huge cancerous tumors. Now, you really do not know what the effects of genetically modified foods will be over the course of, say, 30 or 40 years on a larger organism, such a species such as humans, but that's another factor that's even coming into play for global depopulation. But in the short run, what really is going to be coming down is such changes in the weather and global cooling that it's going to create earlier frost in the growing season, and towards the end of the growing season, killing frost that are going to destroy crops. And we have had these things happen before, but there was actually mass starvation before due to these things. Even that led to, part of the reason was the weakening of the health and vibrance of humans. I know it's not the only reason, but that was part of the reason why the bubonic plague spread. I know it was from other reasons whereby travelers brought it back from other parts of the world, but the hardiness of the human race will be diminished greatly if there is not adequate food or right type of nutrition. Now, one thing obviously we see, and I'm not putting this out to scare people, because I can tell you there's a lot of other stuff I could put out that would be totally the opposite of this, and I can even give you a hint at something else I could put out. But I want people to get away from, not to dwell upon this, because fear is your worst enemy too. I mean, if you get overloaded with too much fear, you're like, you just don't know what to do, and you feel helpless, and you don't do anything. I mean, keep this in mind, but it's coming up soon, because I'm not next week, not next year, but it will be within the next 10 years. Now, I know it's been going, I know the, what do you call it, the conspiracy word for this is chemtrails, but there's another word for it. It's actually, I think it's stratosphere, geoengineering spraying or something like that. There's another real term they use for this. Now, there are people that are thinking that they're doing this, and I know it's a fact, they are doing it, spraying chemicals in the air with planes to, if high up in the altitude, high up in the atmosphere. But so there are people theorizing that this is being done to protect the Earth. That could be, but then maybe not. The reason I'm saying maybe not is because there's other hints that there's a lot of, if you look at the major media, there's always talk about, the population is too large, we need to reduce the population. There's a lot of impetus for Planned Parenthood, abortions, even the thing where you're talking about gay rights and lesbian rights, transgender rights, that will slow down the growth of the population too. But I think they have master. There is something, an ace up their sleeve, and I think the ace up their sleeve is people are actually being lied to about this global warming stuff. Not just about the global carbon tax and all that type of stuff, but it's. I know that's one of the major reasons they push it. It's like we have global warming, so we need to control man and tax mankind's output of carbon emissions. So therefore that tax goes into a global government. But that's in other words, they use an issue that everybody can understand. In other words, whether they're from a poor country, a rich country, various cultural backgrounds, various ages, various language groups, everybody understands. You need to address the issues of the earth. That's why they use this as a common issue for the entire globe. But it's also used as an excuse to tax, and the taxation is to fund the global government. But and I'll get into why because the elite, whatever you want to call them, they pretty much spell out to us exactly what they plan to do. But here I just want to present to you real quickly. We've had many ice ages in the past. The Maunder minimum, which was basically in the 1600s, that's the red over here, and the Dalton minimum, which was in the 1800s. Now, we talk about, if you look back in the history books, when they had the Jamestown settlement in Virginia, what was it, around 1608, I believe it was, if I'm doing this off of memory. That was actually, at a time, a lot of people kind of trying to saying, what are they talking about? The extremely harsh winter, and they're on Virginia, they're near the coast. You wouldn't think that's a very, very harsh winter today, right? Well, back in the early 1600s, it was a very harsh winter because this was during the time of the Maunder minimum. These are sunspot observations. When there's times of lower sunspots, what happens is there's a cooling of the earth. It's a natural cycle. It usually occurs approximately every 206 years, around there, 210 years, roughly. And it occurred, we've had a Dalton minimum back in 1800s. That was the other mini ice age. We're going into, I don't know what to call it in the future, but from around 2015, which has already started more or less, because even though it didn't start so much in the northeast United States as last year because of the El Nino, effects. Globally, there's been a lot of cases of snow that never occurred anywhere in this before. There was snow in Okinawa, Japan. Never had snow accumulations, that is. There was snow in Kuwait. There was a foot of snow 200 miles south of Hanoi. That wasn't even in the mountains. Hanoi, Vietnam. So I mean, there's been a lot of indications, and I'm not going to go over all those indications. There's been many of them that we've been getting a lot colder already. But by the time next year occurs, and it's not a matter of snow, it's a matter of crop failures. What I'm talking about. I mean, yes, you could deal with snow. You could deal with shoveling snow or getting about if you need to, or having a fireplace or supplementing your heat with some other heat source. Yes, I mean, a lot of that can be done. You could deal with that. You can wear more clothing, but the problem is it's going to create more crop failures. And today, even when this occurred back in the 1600s, there was a lot of problems with the crop failures. But today, we have a population in well excess of 8 billion people. The population now is highly, highly dependent upon a small number of highly efficient farms that are run by global corporations, which is another scary thing in itself because you're at the mercy of the global corporations. So it's not going to be a matter of, and actually today, most of the world today does go to bed hungry. But the thing is, this is going to actually start spreading to the Western nations. I also talked about, and this is not a conspiracy stuff I'm putting out here. I'm just giving it as a warning because I could put another issue out here that's a happy freaking little nonsense issue or something. Maybe get a lot of hits and stuff. I am not putting this out for hits. I'm putting this out for a warning. The thing is, where people are not, they're in a dreamland because in the Western United States, this has really not ever happened where we've had widespread in the West, in the United States. I meant to say, we have not had widespread starvation, except during the Great Depression times. But during the Great Depression times, a lot of people knew about farming. And this time, if it occurs during a time when we have food assistance from the government, um, it's going to be a lot worse because the food inflation prices are going to go way the hell up. Now that's because there's going to be far more demand outstripping the supply of food due to frost issues of being killing off crops. And like I said, I could have put out some other thing like Little Kim is dyeing her hair blonde and she's looking so white today or some crap like that, or make a big issue and la di da and a little, you know what I mean? One of those videos out there that everybody clicks on and says, "Oh yeah." I mean, I could play a whole video about this and put another issue. I'm not doing this. I'm not. But you know what? Everybody's concentrating on nonsense. And maybe it's somewhat of an issue or whatever. You want to have fun, fine. You want to concentrate on little things, but make sure you do a little bit of your concentration, not a lot, because it's fear mongering if you get too much focused in on doom and gloom or whatever. But realize there's a problem coming up. It's not something we're going to be able to avoid. This thing where the global cooling is occurring and they're lying to you about global warming, it is going to occur. And it's not so much that we're going to get a little colder and, oh, it's going to be a couple more snowstorms or maybe a little more heat in your house that you need. No, it's going to actually affect the output of food. In other words, if they move the food production to other areas of the country, or maybe it's a little too hot right now or something, fine. Now, I know a lot of times the elite are pretty much ready for this. If you look at the seed bank the globalists have that's stored, they're waiting. They have actually non-genetically modified seeds stored on a remote island in off of the Scandinavian coast between uh, Greenland and Scandinavia near the Arctic Circle, whereby these are stored way deep down, non-genetically modified seeds, all organic for like a doomsday. This is money being spent by the elitists for a reason. I do think they have a plan to deliberately eliminate people, and I'm not gonna be able to freaking just put out a video and save everybody about this garbage. And it's like I'm just giving it out there to people that are, got their ears on and we're gonna understand what the hell's coming up. Because when I look at when they're doing things like this is not something whereby it's totally a just in case scenario. But you know what? This is something you ought to be doing. Maybe not on this. You can't do this on your to their extent because you don't have the funds to do this. But you should be preparing for growing a garden or having some extra supplies of food like rice, coffee, seeds, things like that. Uh, could be freeze-dried foods. It could be things that store a long time, like pasta and peanut butter. Right? Those are two things not very nutritious, but better than nothing. Right? But that's why I think that people are being definitely kept in the dark on these things because there's more focus in on trivial issues like the thing right now with Little Kim, looking really white and blonde, her hair's real blonde, and I'm like, yeah, well, whatever, fine, but everybody's getting in all on those kind of issues, and they're not totally ignoring these type of things. But it's like I'm not going to tell people if they want to ignore it, fine, go ahead and ignore it, fine by me. I mean, it's not like I can't, I'm not trying to freaking save the earth here, but I'm just trying to alert a few people that probably aren't aware that I think there is a major plan to be coming up that they're going to eliminate a large part of humanity. And the reason I could state that is if you look back in 1980, when these Georgia Guidestones were erected, they're actually putting out in the new age of reason, what the laws of humanity will be. Um, well, also interesting too, it was erected on the date of March 22nd, 322, which is a skull and bones number, 1980. That's what they have out on the stones itself. The stones were erected 322, 1980. I thought that was significant. But the thing is, if you look at the first one here, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Considering that's going to be 90%. If that occurs, 90% of the population of this earth is going to disappear. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. In other words, geoengineering the human race. Who's gonna reproduce? What genes are going to be allowed to be to continue on in the human race, and that type of stuff. I mean, some of these are ludicrous. Unite humanity with a living new language. I don't know if that's ever going to occur, but It's like this is what they plan to do. They flat out tell you what they plan to do. And since the Georgia Guidestones were erected in 1980, a lot of people are thinking, well, what the hell are they talking? Maybe they're behind on their schedule. I don't know what the hell what their exact plans are, but and I don't think there is an exact blueprint, a perfectly laid out blueprint. But I can tell you that this is being attempted, and I could see it's going to be successful from a number of areas. But the one area I'm really looking at the most, where it's going to be the most successful, is they're lying to people about this global warming stuff. They're trying to make it illegal that if I tell you there's not global warming, there's going to be global cooling. Eventually, there will be global warming. There's a natural cycle that goes on in the earth. Now, I'm not arguing, and you're not going to hear any argument from me about, I won't say that, cutting down the Amazon rainforest is bad. I don't want the Amazon rainforest to be cut down. I don't want pollution on our rivers and streams. I think emissions ought to be controlled, but then there's a limit to how much you want to do this if it means, killing off humanity, right? In other words, if you cut down so much economic output and so much output from, even farm machinery, what the hell is that? What good is that if we do not use the tools at our disposal for the survival of the human race? But it looks like the real globalists, want the human race diminished by 90%. Now, what I'm going to say here is, and I'm really looking at the picture right now, is like really the small independent farmer is going to be the one that's going to thrive and survive in the future more than anybody. The people that are professionals that have, all the best accolades today and most prestige, they're probably going to be thrown by the wayside because it's going to be something whereby those type of professions are not going to be anywhere near as important as the basic bare bones sustenance of what people really need. Somebody who's a farmer, maybe somebody who's a blacksmith, somebody can actually, work with their hands, skilled labor, frame a house, that type of stuff, or make things out of metal and no metallurgy, how to heat treat steel, or how to form steel into different qualities for tools or knives or whatever the hell they need. Now, I think some of the ones that are actually going to survive if they don't get messed with from the outside population, and they're going to be totally unaffected by this in the future, is the Amish in Pennsylvania. But then again, I don't know if they will not be totally affected by outsiders. And considering that they don't defend themselves, they might be set up for a problem themselves. But the Amish that have been living basically the same as they always have, with the exception of solar panels, they're allowed to use solar panels, I think, per their doctrine. Because it's coming from nature and the sun. And the Amish have been, living pretty much the same way they have for the last 150 years plus. I don't think there's going to be a problem with them at all. But, if you decided to go a little more like this, and, it could be a fun thing. But what I'm telling people this for a reason, because most people are going to ignore this anyway. I mean, they're all involved in giddy rumors and like I said, I'm not putting this out to try to scare people or get attention or, get clicks or hits and all this kind of garbage, because I could have put other things out about what Little Kim's doing or some other thing that, with the transgender community or some garbage. All that stuff is not going to matter. When it comes right down to it, people, when they need to survive, actually all these other things that seem to be so important that are on like Twitter and Tumblr and Facebook, whatever, Facebook's lame, but what's on there today that seem to be the most important are not going to be important at all, because really what it's going to come down to, you're just going to have to be worried about your own existence, not this other stuff, whether you're this, you're that, whatever, all these labels they throw on people. People way back in the day never worried about this kind of garbage before because they're too busy. They had just too much work to do. So, also, I've been putting out a number of videos on rifles and lever action rifles and guns and stuff. I'm going to tell you one. I'm all for farming and stuff, but I'm not somebody who's like. I personally do not know much about farming, but I do know how to hunt. So, if I was in a situation where I needed food, I'm sure there's going to be not too many animals out there. If there is going to be game out there for food, because if everybody's starving, I think there's going to be a lot of hunters out there. But that would be the way to get yourself 100 pounds of meat real fast. And if you have a freezer, and you can keep that for months, because if you're looking to grow crops, one of the problems is going to be it's going to take you a long time to do it. There's going to be a lot more frost and bad weather to deal with, and on top of it, there's going to be a lot of people trying to steal those crops. There'll be people coming in on your land and trying to steal those crops. So hunting may or may not be a solution. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe it would be a solution for prairie dogs and coyotes out west, because there seems to be a hell of a lot of those damn things out west. But just want to tell you that when it comes down to it, I mean, anything's food, right? Possum is food, fine, whatever. You're not supposed to do that, I guess. Maybe there's no possum hunting season, but there's stuff out there. If you're hungry, right? What are you gonna do, right? What are you gonna do if you're starving? I think that this situation is gonna be coming up. Meantime, everybody's worried about Little Kim. Everybody's worried about the transgender law that was passed in North Carolina, or some law that was passed in Oklahoma that needs to be signed if it's signed into legislation about abortion. In the meantime, the elite are lying to you about global warming left and right. And that has major repercussions for what's going to happen in the future for food production. And considering we've never been anywhere near the type of population we have on this earth, the population on this earth has exploded over the last 100 years, actually exploded over the last 30 years due to the Industrial Revolution and technology. We have not experienced another mini ice age during the Industrial Revolution. The last mini ice age was finishing up, which was not anywhere near as bad as the Maunder minimum, was finishing up during the late 1800s, and that was when the Industrial Revolution was kicking in. So since that time, we've been getting warmer. But now we're going into a mini ice age again, and it looks very strong that it's going to be like the Maunder minimum, like what occurred in the 1600s. In other words, before we had records, even here in the United States, exactly of what the temperatures we had before. And it's not about, we could deal with the temperature. And actually, we could deal with the food problem, too, if we plan ahead. But who's planning ahead? And, when you actually take other things into consideration about the global debt, the currency crises that are being engineered by the banks, the pollution of water, and how people like T. Boone Pickens are buying up all the water rights in Oklahoma and Texas. Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. And how much fracking is destroying our water supply. I mean, fracking's not all bad, but I mean, there's a bad side to it too. When you start looking at all these issues, we're in deep shit, big time. Me myself, I know what I'm doing, and just I'm not dwelling upon this all the time, but it's like, and I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'll tell you that right now. I do hope I'm wrong, but I don't think so. It's almost like, people back when they're investing in a tech boom. Oh, you can't lose. Oh, it won't crash that much. People back when you're investing in the housing market in 2007 or 2006. It won't crash that much. Well, you know what? Things happen. That's why they have history books filled with historical events. Historical events aren't the things that we're going along where everything's going along the same. It's when something out of the blue happens, something extraordinary happens. And when these type of things happen, when there's competition for food and resources to keep the population alive, you know what happens with that? Goes all along with that. War. And you know what happens with war? That even destroys more of the crops and more of the freaking food supply. And the type of weapons we got today with radiation, it could really destroy the freaking food supply really bad. So, I don't want you to get overloaded with this thing when I'm telling you this, and it's like, well, we're all going to die, let's have a drink. Well, do what you want. I mean, to me, I realize what's coming up, and it's hard science about the sunspots and its relationship to forecasting weather. As a matter of fact, give you a little tidbit on the end of this too. With a Farmer's Almanac, which a lot of people think is garbage, right? But over the last couple hundred years, it's been about 80% correct. It's been doing better on average for forecasting weather than the multi-billion dollar meteorological computer software they got out there and all the satellites. You know why? Because the Farmer's Almanac uses a formula, and it's actually based on a formula. They got it locked up in a little strong box, but they put it in a computer. But the formula is based upon sunspots. And that sunspots, this stuff was known back in the Middle Ages. That they would count, the astronomers would count the number of sunspots, and they would realize we're going into a shorter growing season next year because it's going to be cooler. That's one thing these freaking people don't calculate, that are actually some of the best meteorologists and the climatologists in the country. They ignore this. They ignore this. They go by historical data, mainly. Sunspot observations are showing that we're definitely going into a major, not just a Dalton minimum, but a Maunder minimum like we had in the 1600s. This is going to be some crazy hellacious experiment that is going to be something on the human race. And I also guarantee you that the people that are the powers that be, maybe when they dreamed up this global warming scheme, it was dreamed up in a meetings at the Club of Rome meetings and Committee of 300 meetings of what could everybody get on board about, where everybody would have a common thing to fight if as a threat to humanity that they can use to unite them under a global government and a global taxation system. And they figured the environment. So initially they jumped on global warming. But if you look back in the 70s, they were talking about global cooling. That was when we had the blizzard of 77, 78 and all that kind of garbage. But if you follow this 208-year cycle, we're going to be going into the 400-year cycle, though, the one from the 1600s. The bottom of it is not going to be till 2035 or 2050. But over the next few years, by 2020, it's going to be extremely apparent, not just in temperature, but by price of food, how much it's going to affect us. It's going to be something else. So I feel sorry for whoever the next president of the United States is going to be, because they're going to have to be dealing with a lot of stuff. And I also want to mention this in the end. California may be hotter and drier during this time of global cooling, because the pattern that occurs during the mini ice age or the major mini ice age, and what happens during the last major ice age and last bigger mini ice age, was most of the earth turned colder on average, but certain areas of the earth got a little bit warmer, which was central Alaska, believe it or not, and California got warmer and drier. So people in California are probably won't be affected by cooling, but they will be affected by more drought. Even though they're recovering right now, I know they're recovering right now, that's the typical pattern of what happens. It's a short reprieve, and it's going to go right back into it again. So I'm not trying to scare people on this, okay? Because like I said, I could just put on the typical topics that other people do on YouTube that are not related to this, and I'm not trying to freaking play a game where, I'm not trying to run a conspiracy channel here or some garbage. I'm trying to give you hands-on warning and hands-on solutions too. So just beware, and you got plenty of time to prepare. And if you probably take a little more steps like the Amish do, you're probably going to be a hell of a lot better off than 99% of the people out there. The Amish, turns out, they're exactly right, weren't they?